Hi, welcome to the planning preview for the meeting coming up for our Sioux Falls Planning Commission on Wednesday, April 4th. We'd like to welcome Jeff Schmidt with us. We're talking a little bit about the upcoming things that we're going to be considering on the agenda. First thing we had is a number one, looks to be a rezone from RD1 twin home duplex to some other RS single family. I think that, let's see, it looks like the location is North Cliff and north of 29th Street North and south of 34th Street North. That must be just east of St. Michael's Cemetery, is that right?
Yes, okay. It is. It's up in that area. And that area, again, as you can see, is what we just talked about. There's some RD, twin home townhome, and there's some RA apartments up there. When we did the zoning, and again, for a lot of the citizens, we're going to allow the people to remain the way they are. Okay, this is a city-initiated rezoning. Originally in 2013 and 2014, we allowed them to have the rights that they wanted to have. So if they wanted to be apartments, they could have moved up and been apartments. But now they're coming back and saying, we don't want any of this. We're a single-family house. Let us be a single-family house. So now we're changing it back to putting them back to single family.
So really this is just formalizing what's already in place, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Nope, that should be pretty straightforward.
Yes.
Looks like number two is rezoned from ag to RS single family. This one is at 12th Street and Ellis Road. Must be right near Cherry Lake.
Yes,
I'm
it is.
guessing.
And
okay.
This is Cherry Lake.
Oh, very good.
Okay. So for the planning preview citizens that have watched this quite a bit, we do all these rezonings, and Sean and I, as planning staff, and Sean's the chair of the planning commission, we talk about them, we make recommendations and ideas, and then you'll vote on them and you send them forward to city council. So city council then ultimately has the decision on, like this one, it's ag or single family. That's the two choices. So this property owner, they're coming in and saying on the west end of Cherry Lake Reserve, there's still some ag land. They own it. They would like it to no longer be farm around ag. They want to take it as part of Cherry Lake Reserve. They want to build more houses. So they bring it into planning commission. They say, can we build houses here? And it's a yes or no decision. You go, can you do single family houses here, or should it stay as croplands and livestock? Yes or no?
Yep, and part of the consideration I know for our planning commission is always what is the highest and best use.
Yeah.
And as we start to think about what makes sense for the city, this one seems to meld pretty well with the existing development that's happening there.
Right, and what we always do, because when we showed up today, we kind of started talking a little bit as we were sitting down at the table. We do have a comprehensive plan. We have a comprehensive plan for the city of Sioux Falls that tries to look at those things, Sean, that you just talked about. What does make sense for the city of Sioux Falls? And we look at how many houses we need and what the population is in the future Sioux Falls, and where should those houses and people end up. And if this is the right location, then we try to put that in the staff report too.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great.
Yeah.
Looks like our item number three is a rezone from S2 to RA3. And that's over at South Cliff and south of East 77th. That must be by the USF Sports Complex,
Correct.
I'm guessing?
Yeah,
okay.
The USF ground on the east side of Cliff Avenue there, it's all S2. So S2 is institutional campus ground, and they would like to build some apartments. And it's not even going to be apartments at this point, but that's what they're going to rezone it to. What they propose, and again, you and I can't hold them to proposals, but they'd like to do senior living. So in that area, and so they need RA3 high density housing to do a 3-story or larger apartment living. And then if they get the right investors and the plans to be approved and the building code and the parking and the common area, all those things, then they could go and build this type of housing for senior living. Again, once it's zoned, they can also do anything else in an RA3, which is residential apartments.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times they do these kinds of things very early in the process just to make sure that this is going to be acceptable to the community and everybody else that they're trying to get feedback from. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and again, you look down in that area, 77th and Cliff, and you see again the sports fields and the complexes, and proposals for maybe some more commercial and what does seem to make sense down in that area.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Looks like the next one, item number 4, is a rezone from S2, Institutional Campus Plan Unit Development, to looks like the same thing. Only this is at 69th and Louise. I'm guessing this is maybe they're moving a retention pond or something like that. Okay.
Yeah. This is the Vera's campus, and it is, again, just like the previous one, an S2 area, the campus. And as I always say pretty much every month, this is the nice thing about having the TV show and having the visual images. So you'll show a little bit about the land, we can see some of the exhibits, and follow up with us if you have more questions. But originally when they come in, they show us, here's what our campus is. We believe this is where our detention is going to be, and this is where our buildings are going to be. Now they're fine-tuning it a little bit more. They're still having neighborhood meetings. They're going out and talking to people. But there is some land on the west side of Hemmingstone Trail that was CN for conservation that they're bringing into their S2 to put some parking, some buildings, and that's really the discussion that they're having at this point, is the rezoning. Later on in the meeting or in our discussion, we'll have an initial development plan. So I'll do these all right now. You have the rezoning, should the land be this or this? Then we go, now let's look at the initial development plan. Show us the lot and block layout. Show us the buildings. Show us the streets. Show us how it's going to be laid out. Later, they'll bring a building in and they'll say, this is the building we'd like to build. They bring it into staff. We look at it against the initial development plan, against the rezoning. If it doesn't match up, they can't build that building. So it's kind of setting the course. If they rezone it, bring a plan in at this public hearing and say, here's what we kind of think we're going to do at this point. Mm-hmm. So they're starting to lay out this framework.
Nope, that makes a lot of sense. Looks like number 5 is a rezone from Ag to RS single family, RD1, and a couple of other things out by 69th and Sundowner. That must be just west of the 229-29 interchange,
Correct.
I'm guessing?
Yeah,
okay.
About 80 acres, I would give or take. So 80 acres of land down there south of 69th Street. And my quick calculation, it was probably about 40 acres of single family and 20 acres or so of twin homes and townhomes. The rest of it, and again, I haven't done a very good job of when I keep saying CN, conservation. CN conservation is really, we've always tried to describe it the best we could for our citizens, and so conservation should be just that. It's not park ground, it's not soccer fields, it should be set aside to conserve. So a lot of these are drainage ways, ponds, wetlands, and they're conservatories, they're areas that are just going to remain in a natural state. So then they have the remaining land. After the single family and the twin homes are done, they'll have some conservation ground.
Sure, that'll be nice. Let's see, next one, item number 6. Let's see, that's S2 moving to, or S2 and C4 and a couple of other things. Moving to a handful of other things beyond that. Those are quite a variety from 69th and Tallgrass. That must be just east of there on the other side of the interchange. Sure.
It's interesting now that I start to look at this. Here we are coming into April. It must be getting close to springtime, and people are finalizing their plans and going, we want to start construction. So this is Sanford's ground. We did Avera's, then we did a private development. Now we're on the east side of Tallgrass. And along the west side of Tallgrass, the east side of the interstate. And they own, 160, 200 acres down there on the interstate in Tallgrass. And they had it all as commercial ground and S2 institutional ground. Now they're really getting fine-tuned. I think everybody knows they came out and they did a big media release. They gave a lot of their ground, significant portion, to the Lutheran school. So they gave to the Lutheran school, like right in the middle of their ground. So Lutheran Schools coming in, that's going to be S1 institutional. There's going to be conservation area that's going to be set aside for drainage. There's going to be some REC set aside for football fields, soccer fields, track, softball. So that will be set aside. And then the remaining, they're going to say, and now what's left, this is our S2 and this is our commercial. They already have that now, but they're going to try to balance the remaining out, so they still have to change those so that everything's still laid out the way it was.
It sounds like really those adjustments are fairly minor when we look at compatibility with each other and those kinds of things, aren't
In
they?
the end, you sit there and you go, if they had 160 acres, it was like 100 acres and 60 acres, and then they go, now they're all fine tuning and it's still the 160 acres, and it just gives people a little bit more detail now. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Let's see, looks like the next one is C2 commercial and a couple of other things to, let's see, over at 309 South Joliet.
Arrowhead Parkway and Veterans Parkway.
By Dolly Farm.
By Dolly Farm,
Okay,
but on the north side. And Joliet's on the north side there. They would like, at least at this point, they're interested in building a building. And it's zone commercial, which is one of our higher intense uses, commercial, and it's C2. But we have height restrictions on what you can do for commercial, because typically commercial's slab on grade, it's flat roofs. And my understanding, again, without knowing what they want to do, they have a use that wants to be taller than is allowed in a commercial business. It is kind of commercial business, but they have a need to go a little bit higher. Well, they can do that in this institutional S1 zone. So they're coming in and saying, well, we're going to rezone it to S institutional, do this institutional type of use, but be a little bit taller building.
Okay, well that makes sense. That's why we have rules in the first place.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, looks like item number 8 is a rezone from I2 heavy industrial to downtown plan unit development and REC. This one, let's see, it's at 196.5 East 6th Street. That must be right across from Raven, I'm guessing.
Yeah, this is Sioux Steel.
Okay, very good.
Yes, so everybody's heard, well, not everybody, but the people have heard. Sioux Steel's been a long-standing industry in downtown Sioux Falls, and they're interested in possibly moving out of Sioux Falls. So they want to start inquiring with the public and stakeholders and interested to find out what their property could be used as in downtown Sioux Falls. Well, it could be used for a downtown planned unit development. Again, looking at the exhibits that you'll see on planning preview, everything in downtown is zoned downtown. Downtown allows you to do offices and hotels and commercial and residential and restaurants and parking and parks. It's downtown. If you're in Omaha or Minneapolis or Sioux Falls, downtown allows you to do all these things. So that's their first step is, well, let's do downtown, but they don't know if they want to do parking or hotels, or if they want to do restaurants or condos. That's still to be decided. And so if people want to come to the meeting, they're welcome to come to the Planning Commission meeting, but don't expect to show up and go, so how many housing units are they going to build? What's the price point? We have no idea. That's not the first decision that they're going to make.
Several decisions down the road,
way
I'm sure.
down the road.
And really this seems to kind of reinforce much of what we're trying to do downtown in creating variety and just really a kind of a life center to be able to do a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah, and again, just like what we've kind of talked about already today, once they do the PUDs, as we saw with Avira and Sanford, and then they come in with an initial development plan. They'll say, now we want to put buildings on this site. And we're like, okay, you don't really have to tell us what buildings, but show us where the buildings are. And then when they come in to get a permit, those buildings have to match what their plan was. So that's well down the road. But first they want to change it from, do you want I2 heavy industrial downtown, or do you want downtown and downtown? That's your two, where you go, yeah, I think we might.
I think downtown might be the better choice.
Yeah, I think downtown and downtown makes more sense than I2 heavy industrial.
Sure.
So if you decide not to, we are going to remain with heavy industrial and downtown.
Yep, sounds good. Looks like number 9 is the
The
first of our revision
Yes.
for an initial development plan.
Correct, yes. So that's when they're going to show us the buildings in the Vera plan.
Yep, okay.
Yep.
Nope, that makes sense. Looks like number 10 is the first of a series of preliminary subdivision plans you talked a little bit about earlier. Now these, as you said, define kind of how many of a particular type of lot, or
Right.
the amount of density that is planned to be there, or a developmental flow, or any number of things, right?
Yeah, and again, these preliminary subdivision plans, this one's for Galway, the 6th, 9th, and Sundowner one, where they're going to say single family, twin homes, and conservation. We really want to preliminarily start to see where are your lots going to be, where's the streets going to be, what are the contours going to lay out, what's the pipe sizes for your water and sewer. A lot of details that maybe the citizens don't want. They want to see the lot and block, but they don't need the minutia, but we do. We want to start looking at it from a planning commission and going, okay, have you preliminary looked at it? And they're like, yes. Then they need to go the next level until they get a building permit.
Right, and that's at the point where we start to send it through all the different departments of the city to verify that fire has reasonable access for what they need to get
Absolutely.
into, police have adequate access.
The pipe sizes are all
Yeah.
adequate to meet. Well, how many units are they going to have down there? We haven't looked at it yet. Yes, we have. We look at how many units, what's the pipe size to drain it for stormwater, what about sanitary sewer, what about water flow? We've looked at everything.
Right, and that's great to know from the planning commission standpoint that the staff has really looked at things pretty
Right.
closely and verified that things are going to work.
Right.
Okay, great. Looks like item number 11, similar one. This one's over at Meadow Vista Edition by La Mesa and West 3rd.
I really like this one. I'm very interested in it. I hope we maybe even get some citizens' review of this. This is north of 12th Street. It's on 3rd Street and west of Marion Road in La Mesa. This has been before the Planning Commission in the past. And we had a rezoning up there from some single families to some twin homes. This is already zoned, this area, as RD1, and that's residential density for twin homes. It's zoned up there, but now they're bringing in the preliminary plan to finish out the market. Okay, that's what I'm excited about, because again, we hear so much about Sioux Falls. Where's the affordability? What are you doing for density? What's happening in the market? This is part of that discussion that we sit there and go, okay, you got Skunk Creek up there, you got Family Park, it's a beautiful area, and they came in, they changed a first phase, and they said, here's what we're thinking happening in the market, and they showed us, and now they're coming in with the second and third phase, and I'm really kind of excited to see how the community is going to react and how everybody's going to be interested into it.
Right, I agree.
So-
Okay. Looks like our next one is a kind of a review of a
Yes.
preliminary subdivision plan of that over by Sanford we talked about a little bit ago.
Where's the school going to be? How much traffic's coming out of the school grounds? How much commercial development? We're looking at that Sanford ground down there, and what's the pipe sizes and the contours and the drainage. So
Looks like item number 13 is a conditional use permit for on-sale alcohol, let's see, over by 5801 East 41st.
41st Street and Veterans Parkway. Once the ground gets zoned to something, there are some things that they can come in to get a building permit for. Other things we changed in 2013 and 14 that says you have to get a conditional use basically because of your proximity. Okay? If you're so far away from single family, go get your building permit. But if you're in proximity to single family, you need to come back and have a public hearing. So this is within 500 feet of single family. So they want to do a sports bar restaurant on sale. So it's on sale alcohol within 500 feet. They need to come and have a public hearing. Then with all of these, are there conditions that you want to put on it? It goes to Planning Commission with the public hearing, and we say, what are appropriate conditions? I bring this up at Planning Preview all the time. We have great discussions at Planning Commission, hopefully again with the citizens, but you go, just like with your own house, they have rights. We don't want to get into what they're doing inside about the color of the bar stools or how many people sit around the table, because we're not going to regulate that, but how it impacts the people outside, we want to be able to, if we can enforce that, we want to enforce it. If we can't enforce it, it's probably not an appropriate condition.
Sure, and this is another one that I know is thoroughly reviewed by all kinds of staff, including police and
fire,
everybody,
building
as far
code.
as potential risk for the neighbors or the community at large or whatever it might be, right? Yep. Looks like the next one is a conditional use permit for an off-premise sign, or what we often call billboards, right? At 57th and I-29.
This is on the south side of 57th Street, right next to Interstate 29. And why we call them off-premise signs versus billboards is because they advertise things that are not on that site. So when they put that sign on there, they're not going to be advertising anything that's on that location. So you go, they want to put up a sign there, they have a public hearing on it, and we'll see if it's an okay or not.
Sure, sounds good. Looks like the next couple are another alcohol beverage conditional use permit. First one is 4719 East Arrowhead.
It's on the east side of town in the Shopko Center. It's not Shopko. I don't want to confuse people, but it's one of those centers on the east end of that. And it's probably a vacant tenant right now, or it's converting to something. And again, they want to do an on-sale beverage establishment, but since there's single family close to them, they have to have a public hearing and do the conditional use.
Yeah, that's one of those conditions where we do have RS that's really close to commercial,
right.
which we try to avoid, and we try to get other buffers and different things to happen between there, but that's an older development that maybe was before some of those theories of buffering, right?
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Let's see, looks like item number 16 is something similar at 2714 East 10th.
On 10th Street and 229. So it's just to the west of 229 and East 10th Street. Again, an existing center shopping area with restaurants on the south side of 10th Street, and they want to open another facility like this too. So we go through the public hearing, we notify the property owners, the neighbors in the area, and then they come out and look at it.
And there we have a similar older condition where we don't have kind of that transitional zoning between the housing and the commercial.
And apartments to single family, and
Okay, good. Looks like item number 17 is a conditional use permit for full service restaurant.
Very similar.
Over at Garfield.
And 12th Street.
309.
Yep. Kiwanis and 10th or 12th Street and Garfield, and here they want to do a full service restaurant. So the spacing, these have all been 500 feet. This one is within 250 feet. So we still have the same public hearing. We look at it and make a decision.
Nope, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What else did we want to talk about today? Was there anything about some of our maybe coordinating between county and city and all of our ordinances?
For the citizens at home, we talked about a lot of different zoning regulations today. And Sean and I have talked before at these planning previews. We also have zoning regulations outside the city where we sit down and we talk to the county staff. Historically, those ordinances, we have some in Minnehaha County, some in Lincoln County, and then we have the city of Sioux Falls. So we have these 3 sets of ordinances, and it's about time that we sit down and review them again. So, talking at planning preview, bringing it up to the citizens, what things should we be looking at? Things outside the city, not necessarily way out in the county, but in this fringe area that we call the joint jurisdiction area. And my initial premise was really, we should make them as close to what we have in the city right now as possible, but they're not in the city yet.
And really the function of that is because that fringe area, as you call it, is potentially going to be future Sioux Falls.
Right.
So we don't want a bunch of non-compliant uses that really don't coordinate with the rest of the city and all of the requirements that the rest of us need to live by, right?
Yeah, and I mean, we have the ordinances in place already. They've been there, we've been using them since the 1970s. We update them as we see fit with certain sections, but it's about time that we sit down and comprehensively go through the entire thing and go, let's completely update it. And if we're going to completely update it, what I, just off the top of my head, I'm thinking about is when we did shape places for the city in 2013 and 2014, the big changes where we said zoning. The zoning is really what should override everything else and limit the conditional uses. We saw today, you know, we don't have that many conditional uses, but they're only if you're within 500 feet, if you're within 250 feet. Otherwise, you're fine. You get to do it.
Now, we don't have as many anymore, but we used to have a
used to
whole
have-
lot of them.
we,
right?
I mean, used to do
Yeah.
70 to 100 a year. We used to do a lot. And now we're down to, I think we just talked about this, you know, maybe we do 20 a
Right.
year.
20 or 30 is
Yes.
as much as it gets. Yeah.
In the county, we haven't done that. We haven't gone back and revisited and said, what should really be a use by right and allowed to do, and what should be a conditionally. We need to go back and look at that. And so when property owners who own the property and property owners who are next to that really should understand what's the zoning and what's the conditional uses. We need to have that discussion and clean this type of stuff up. Things that are accessory, things that are primary, we need to have that discussion. And this is where, again, we've discussed this throughout planning preview. We need to look at the comprehensive plan. We have a plan. We've had public discussions. You mentioned this is going to be in the city, but it's not yet. So if we know what it's, let's put that in the zoning ordinance.
Sure. Then that way everybody can anticipate what it's going to
Right.
be someday, which
Yes.
is what a comprehensive plan is all about, is planning for the future so we have something that's relatively consistent.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Nope,
So-
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and we haven't started yet, but again, just throwing it out there and having citizens start to think about it, you know, so that we can get prepared when we do say, hey, citizens, we're going to start talking about these new zoning ordinances. So, yeah, we started to hear about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Anything else we need to cover?
No, always feel free to contact us because there's a lot of information going through the planning office.
Yep. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. We've got our meeting coming up on Wednesday, April 4th, excuse me. Hopefully you can join us. We'd love to hear comments from citizens and the city because those are critical in our consideration. But as always, we try to balance carefully owner rights with property rights and with neighbor rights because we have to keep that as consistent as possible and as fair to everyone as possible. Wouldn't you say so, Jeff?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for joining us.